Application of marketing research. We all know that marketing research includes research in respect of consumers, product, sales, distribution channels, advertising, pricing, and physical distribution. In this lesson, we will explain research design, various steps of research process, and the types of research design. After going through this presentation, you should be able to explain research design, understand the needs of research design, describe the steps in research process, analyze the types of research designs. Let us begin with defining research design. According to Kerlinger, research design is the plan, structure, and strategy of investigation conceived so as to obtain answers to research questions and to control variance. A research design is the arrangement of conditions for collection and analysis of data in a manner that aims to combine relevance to the research purpose with economy in procedure. The research is the plan, structure, and strategy of investigations of answering the research question, is the overall plan or blueprint the researchers select to carry a study. Research design always gives the answers of following questions. What is the study about? Why is the study being made? Where will the study be carried out? What type of data is required? Where can the required data be found? What periods of time will the study include? What will be the sample design? How will the data be analyzed? Marketing research plays a key role in the marketing system. It provides data on the effectiveness of the marketing mix and insights for changes. Marketing research is a main data source for management information systems and DSS. Research design minimizes time and money, includes advanced planning. It avoids flaws and helps in selection of appropriate tools, eliminates bias and marginal error. The problem definition is the first step towards launching a research study. The research problem specifies the information required to progress towards the achievement of the research goals. The objectives of the research must be identified and formulated with great care to ensure that all those aspects required identifying and solving the set problem will be addressed. Collecting data is the most important part of any research process. The information must always be of a very high quality and absolutely reliable. The fieldwork process must therefore be well executed and supervised. Primary research data are observed and recorded directly from respondents. The information collected is directly related to the specific research problem identified. All the questions that one asks the respondents must be totally unbiased and formulated so that all the different respondents understand it. Secondary data is compiled inside or outside the organization for some purpose other than the current investigation. Then analyze the collected data. After analyzing, prepare the presentation report and then follow up. If random assignment is used, we call the design a randomized experiment or true experiment. If random assignment is not used and then second question arises, does the design use either multiple groups or multiple waves of measurement? If the answer is yes, we would label it as a quasi-experimental design. If the answer is no, we would call it a non-experimental design. This threefold classification is especially useful for describing the design with respect to internal validity. A randomized experiment generally is the strongest of the three designs when your interest is in establishing a cause-effect relationship. A non-experiment is generally the weakest in this respect. I have to hasten to add here that I don't mean that a non-experiment is the weakest of the three designs overall, but only with respect to internal validity or causal assessment. In fact, the simplest form of non-experiment is a one-shot survey design that consists of nothing but a single observation O. This is probably one of the most common forms of research, and for some research questions, especially descriptive ones, is clearly a strong design. When I say that the non-experiment is the weakest with respect to internal validity, all I mean is that it isn't a particularly good method for assessing the cause-effect relationship that you might think exists between a program and its outcome. The different types of designs. Consider one of each in design notation. The first design is a post-test only randomized experiment. You can tell it's a randomized experiment because it has an R at the beginning of each line indicating random assignment. The second design is a pre-post non-equivalent groups quasi-experiment. We know it's not a randomized experiment because random assignment wasn't used. And we know it's not a non-experiment because there are both multiple groups and multiple waves of measurement. That means it must be a quasi-experiment. We add the label non-equivalent because in this design we did not explicitly control the assignment, and the groups may be non-equivalent or not similar to each other. Finally, we show a post-test only non-experimental design. You might use this design if you want to study the effects of a natural disaster like a flood or tornado, and you want to do so by interviewing survivors. Notice that in this design you don't have a comparison group. For example, interview in a town down the road that did not have the tornado to see what difference the tornado caused, and you don't have multiple waves of measurement. For example, a pre-tornado level of how people in the ravaged town were doing before the disaster. Does it make sense to do the non-experimental study? Of course. You could gain lots of valuable information by well-conducted post-disaster interviews, but you may have a hard time establishing which of the things you observed are due to the disaster rather than to other factors, the peculiarities of the town or pre-disaster characteristics. Next is pre-experimental design. It is one type of the experimental design. It has three subdivisions. There are one short case study or single case study, one group pre-test, post-test design, the static group comparison design. One short case study or single case study. Experimental treatment, a cause change in single case study that studies at once following a treatment or an agent presumed to cause damage. Because the study design has a total absence of control, it is considered to be little value as an experiment. One group pre-test, post-test design. Experimental treatment, pre-test, post-test. Here only one group is observed before and after the independent variable is introduced. Loss of the control group decreases the usefulness of the study, but may be necessary in cases where it is not possible or feasible to have control groups. The static group comparison design. The static group that has experienced the independent variable is compared with one that has not. Here the experimental group received the independent variable, but control group did not receive the independent variable. Next is quasi-experimental design. It is one which has full experimental control. Usually randomization is not possible. It has three subdivisions. They are non-equivalent control group design or the four-celled design without use of randomization. The time series quasi-experimental design, the multiple time series design, non-equivalent control group design or the four-celled design without use of randomization, experimental group not randomly selected, experimental treatment pre-test post-test control group not randomly selected, pre-test post-test time series experimental design, experimental treatment pre-test 1 2 3 4 5 6 6 5 4 3 2 post-test 1 the time series experiment design. A single group experiment comprises of series of observation in the before time period to establish a baseline. The experimental variable is then introduced, followed by another series of observation to examine the effect of the independent variable. The multiple time series design experimental group experimental matter pre-test 1 2 3 4 5 6 6 5 4 3 2 post-test 1 control group pre-test 1 2 3 4 5 6 6 5 4 3 2 post-test 1. Non-experimental research designs. This type of design is otherwise called as weakest design. Need not obey any principles. It has so many subdivisions. Reasons for undertaking. Non-experimental studies number of human characteristics or independent variables are not subject to experimental manipulation or randomization. Some variables cannot ethically be manipulated. For some research, it is not practical to conduct a true experiment or manipulate variables. For some situations, it is more realistic to explore phenomena in more natural manner. Non-experimental research is often needed to scope out the experimental one. Classification of non-experimental designs are descriptive or exploratory survey studies interrelationship or difference correlation studies, ex post facto studies, prediction studies, developmental studies, cross-sectional and longitudinal studies, retrospective and prospective studies. Now let's see how much you have learned till now. State whether the following statements are true or false. The basic rule of data collection process begins with secondary data, then proceed, if necessary, to collect primary data. True. Most conclusive research design involves qualitative research techniques. False. The survey method involves a structured questionnaire administered to a sample of a population and designed to elicit information from respondents. True. Before we end, let us briefly revise what we have studied till so far. The scope of marketing research stretches from the identification of a consumer's wants and needs to the evaluation of consumer satisfaction. It includes research in respect of consumers, product, sales, distribution channels, advertising, pricing, and physical distribution. A research design is the arrangement of conditions for collection and analysis of data in a manner that aims to combine relevance to the research purpose with economy in procedure. It provides data on the effectiveness of the marketing mix and insights for changes. A randomized experiment generally is the strongest of the three designs when your interest is in establishing a cause-effect relationship.